Hey everybody, this is Rykard here again, and welcome to another narrated Pokemon X and Y Wi-Fi battle. Today's battle is against an opponent by the name of PokeMan, which took place on my stream the other day. And just by judging by the team preview right here, we can obviously see that we had two very different mentalities when building our teams for the purposes of this battle. My opponent took a more serious approach, bringing things like Gliscor and Genesect and Mega Alakazam and Infernape, whereas I just brought a bunch of stuff that was in my boxes. So I have a defensive Arcanine, which I love using. This is actually my version of it, not the one that you saw in the previous battle, which was Xenon's Arcanine. I'm bringing a Bulk Up Technician Hitmontop, a Raichu, which is Life Orb, just a bunch of coverage moves along with, Electric Stab, a Mantine, which actually packs Defog, which is really useful nowadays, obviously because that gets rid of hazards. It's very cool that Mantine gets it, and also with its really good typing and the water absorbability, it just makes a really good special wall. I'm bringing a Scarfed Furret, and then also a defensive Nidoqueen, which also sets up hazards, which some of you might be thinking doesn't really work too well with a Defogger on my team, but it's really more or less there as an insurance policy in case I need to get rid of the hazards my opponent set up at the expense of my own, which I am more than okay doing depending on, the Pokemon on my opponent's team. But with that, let's just jump into things right now and see how they go. So to start things off, I'm going to lead off with my Arcanine as my opponent leads off with his Infernape. Now, because Infernapes are typically physical attackers, and this Arcanine obviously has Intimidate, I'm going to be free to stay in here just for one turn, get a little bit of damage off on this Infernape. Some Infernapes that are in lead positions are often Focus Sashed, so I just wanted to break that right away. Turns out he does pack the Stone Edge, but as you see right here, it really doesn't do too much damage, even though it is super effective, because it is Unstab, and also because I got off the Intimidate. So I'm just going to stay in here one more turn, go for the Morning Sun just to get up a bunch of health, as my opponent switches into his Gastrodon, which typically would be a bad matchup, but I actually packed the Hidden Power Grass on this Arcanine, which is going to allow me to actually deal half damage to this Gastrodon, allowing me to potentially 2-hit KO it, which is something I was not expecting, even though, this Gastrodon is 4 times weak to it, because this Arcanine isn't even remotely invested in special attack at all, and typically Gastrodons are invested into special defense. But either way, he's actually going to switch out right here, go back into his Infernape, and this is actually really good because now he has his Infernape in here without the Intimidate, which means that I'm actually going to be threatened out right here. So I do decide to switch out into my Nidoqueen right here, which is going to allow me to pretty much take either a Stone Edge or a Close Combat from this Infernape. He's obviously not going to go for the Flare Blitz or whatever fire move he has right there. And as you see, he is going to get his defense lowered, which means that I could very easily KO him with a Earth Power on the following turn. But rather than do that, I actually take this opportunity to set up my Toxic Spikes right now, because I think these are going to be very useful throughout the battle. So I get up one layer as my opponent switches into his Gliscor, gets the Poison Heal activated, so I'm going to actually have to switch out here because I don't have Ice Beam on this Nidoqueen. I actually have Fire Blast on it, which comes into play a little bit later. But I decided to switch out into my Mantine right here to dodge the Earthquake. Turns out he just goes for Knockoff instead, and then I decide to go for the Air Slash actually on this turn, expecting him to either switch out into his Gastrodon to get the the Storm Drain activated, but he actually goes into his Porygon 2, gets the Trace, and gets the Water Absorb, obviously, which means I cannot go for water moves anymore. I actually was not even remotely predicting that, but on the following turn, since he brought in his Porygon 2, I was assuming he was going to go for like a Discharge or a Thunderbolt, so I go into my Raichu to try to get the Lightning Rod boost. Turns out he goes for the Ice Beam instead, and because of that, I'm just going to switch out right here. I know he's going to recover on the following turn, so I figured this would be a perfect opportunity for me to go into Furret right here. I actually have Knockoff on this Furret, which would allow me to get rid of this Porygon 2's Eviolite, which is going to allow me to easily take it down on the following turn if I do get the chance to, or at least in the coming turns of the battle. But turns out, even after I knock it off, he just decides, I'm just going to freeze your Furret, which is actually a really big deal because this is my Scarfer, and if he does have a Mega Alakazam, which he does have an Alakazam, I don't know if it's Mega, this would be the only thing on my team to outspeed it, so that's kind of huge right now. But either way, I know that he's just going to keep going for Tri-Attacks. I don't want to stay in and lose my Furret just yet. I could possibly save it for later. So I'm just going to go into Arcanine right here. It is pretty specially bulky and also physically bulky. It does pack the Will-O-Wisps to make it just take hits all around. So I figured I could take these Tri-Attacks all day. Decided to just go for a Flamethrower, predicting him to actually go for the Recover, but he doesn't. So now that he's at this low range of a health, even though I also want to recover with a Morning Sun, I figured, you know what, I'm just going to take the opportunity to take this thing out right now and go from there. So I do, and this will leave me in a pretty good position. He doesn't really have too many things that can very easily switch into Arcanine, but he does have his Gliscor, which will threaten me out with Earthquake, even though if I were to, say, bring in Arcanine on the Gliscor, I'm pretty sure I would outspeed the Gliscor and also get the Intimidate to live in Earthquake. But I decided to switch out to my Mantine again to dodge the Earthquake, and then I decided, you know what, I predicted the switch last time into Gastrodon and he didn't do it, so this time I'm going to go for the Scald, and luckily for me I actually get a crit here. It does help me out a little bit, but it's not too big of a deal because I do have Sucker Punch on my Hitmontop as like an insurance policy in case, you know, everything goes down. Obviously it's super effective, and because he's poisoned and no longer has Magic Guard, even if he subs or Calm Minds, I can just keep Sucker Punching, and that just puts me in a good position. But here he does obviously trace the Water Absorb when he Mega Evolves, so I go for the Air Slash, and then instead of sacrificing my Mantine right there, because I know Mantine can be useful for dealing with Gliscor, I decided to sacrifice Furret right here, even though it is adorable and goes down. I'm very sad about that, but thankfully that allows the Alakazam to go down as well due to the poison from the Toxic Spike set up by my Nidoqueen. But here I actually bring in my Nidoqueen thinking it was the best thing to bring in, as my opponent brings in his Genesect, and I am just clicking Fire Blast right here, but he goes for Iron Head, gets a flinch. I'm like, okay, it happens. And then he goes for another Iron Head and gets another flinch, and I'm like, well, that sucks because I just lost my Nidoqueen for absolutely no reason when I could have just one-shot your Genesect with no trouble at all, but knowing my luck, I probably would have missed the Fire Blast anyway. But either way, this allows me to freely go into my Arcanine right now, get off the Intimidate, and also potentially threaten it out with a Flamethrower. Instead of recovering, I just decided, you know what, I just want damage on this thing, because if it does stay in, I just want to kill it. So I go for the Flamethrower. There's still a little bit of good damage on this Infernape, and also with the Toxic Spikes racking up damage, it's going to help me bring this Infernape down into a very, very easily revenge killable range. But rather than obviously lose my Arcanine, because I see that I do need that to deal with Genesect, go onto my Hitmontop. As I said, this is Technician, so I don't get an Intimidate here, but I know I could live a close combat, and this is going to easily allow me to just revenge kill this thing with a Mach Punch on the following turn, which is going to be more than enough to take out this Infernape. Now, my opponent is now, after his Infernape goes down, going to switch out into Gastrodon here, which I honestly am not really sure why, because I think that Gliscor would have just been the better switch overall, but he goes out into this. It does get poisoned, which is very nice, and because I know he's going to want to recover, I'm just going to bulk up right here to get up a attack boost, because if I were to just Mach Punch and then he recovered, it would have pretty much left him at the same health he is now, so I figured I might as well just boost my stats. So I'm going to go for a Mach Punch on the following turn, which is going to be actually able to do a pretty solid bit of damage to this Gastrodon, even though I'm guessing this is physically bulky because of how well it didn't take my Hidden Power Grass before. But he's going to go for the Scald and unfortunately get the Burn, which is going to just cripple my Hitmontop completely, which is not good at all. And now because his Gastrodon has burned my Hitmontop, he can pretty much just live anything from it all day. So he's just going to actually go onto his Gliscor instead to obviously take my Mach Punches extremely well. It's resisted, I'm burned, I can't really do anything about it. So he's actually just going to stay in here and go for the Protect on the coming turn to just stall out my burn damage while trying to obviously not take any damage at all. And I was actually extremely terrified of him having Substitute right here, because if he did, it probably would have been game over for me. I don't really have anything that can easily take out a Gliscor when it has a sub up, so that was just very unfortunate, but thankfully he doesn't have it. I'm assuming his last move is either Roost or some like Toxic or Ice Fang. I don't really get to see it. I've only seen Protect, Knock Off, and Earthquake from him. But either way, this is going to allow me to go into my Raichu right here, and I have the Hidden Power Ice on this thing, and I am Life Orbs, and I wasn't actually expecting this to KO, but it does, which I was really happy with. And can we just take note of the fact how awesome Raichu looks in 3D? I just figured I'd point that out. But either way, he goes into his Genesect right here, and typically Genesects are Scarfed, but it looks like he is Banded or something else, because I actually outspeed it, which is really nice. Raichu actually naturally outspeeds Genesect, even without the boost that it got this generation. But I'm able to get a good amount of damage off on this thing, which is going to allow me to now easily bring in my Arcanine to get the Intimidate off, and then obviously easily KO it. But because he still has this Gastrodon left, I'm actually going to take this opportunity to Morning Sun right here, get up a huge amount of health, pretty much bring me back all the way up to full. And since my opponent is at about half health and will be a little bit below that after the poison damage kicks in at the end of this turn, I know that from past damage of my Hidden Power Grass, I'm free to just go for that right here and just clean out this Gastrodon from this range, which is absolutely amazing. because, as I said before, typically this probably would be a really bad matchup for Arcanine, but because of Hidden Power Grass, it's actually in my favor, surprisingly. But here, now, all he has left is this Genesect. I have Arcanine and my Mantine left, and because I saw that he got a boost here and I want to get off the Intimidate, I just go into Mantine, sacrifice it as he goes for the Extreme Speed, so that I can safely go back into my Arcanine on the following turn, get off the Intimidate, and then proceed to just KO it with a Flamethrower at the end of this turn for the victory in this battle. So that is pretty much it for this battle, everybody. So I wanted to thank you all for watching. I had a ton of fun doing this battle, and it was really nice to just bring a bunch of really fun Pokemon and, you know, take a battle not so seriously, and also win in the process against a team that is pretty serious in nature from the looks of it. But anyways, everybody, that is it, as I said. So thank you all for watching. Feel free to obviously follow me on Twitch so you can be notified when I do go live and stream, so you can get battles with me. I also post videos of when I'm streaming on YouTube for ease of access, and I also will actually post it on Twitter now because somebody told me that I should do that. So follow me in all those places and you can be notified when I'm streaming so you can get battles with me. But as always, everybody, thank you all for watching, and take care as always. Goodbye, and I will see you all next time.